So the first key aim is to share experience of the development of civil society spotlight reports. The second very important aim of the session is to discuss the objectives, content, format, process, and suggested tagline for the reports. And finally, propose the initial key message of focus of the reports. This is a very interactive session, so we welcome you to interact all the time with using the chat box, and our colleagues will explain in more detail later how to use the Jamboard to put your ideas, questions, comments, and all this stuff. Bernard, over to you, and then I will explain the overall structure of the program and share with you also the answer you kindly share with us when doing the registration. Over to you, Bernard.
Thank you very much, Luis Eduardo. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, colleagues. For me, it's very early in the morning, but very happy to join this initiative. And thank you, Luis Eduardo, for all the preparations. Well, as you know, the High Level Political Forum is the main United Nations platform on sustainable development. And it has a central role in the follow-up and the review of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development at global level. So the HLPF was established back in 2012 by the General Assembly, and the forum meets annually. And this year, SDG 4 is very important because SDG 4 on the right to education is under review. So HLPF is obviously a political space, and perhaps it is one of the main international advocacy spaces where GCE works. So for us, for the Secretariat, is critical, trying to strengthen GCE members' participation. And this is maybe the most important accountability process on the SDG-related obligations. So as part of this follow-up and review mechanisms, the Sustainable Development Agenda encourages member states, you all know that, to conduct regular reviews on the state of realization of SDGs, and more particularly on SDG 4. So these national reviews and the reporting process by governments, as you also know, is completely voluntary. No one is forced to produce a report. And this year we have 45 countries reporting to the HLPF. So, well, based on our experience, some of these reports are seriously produced by governments, and in some other cases, these are just kind of simple situation reports. So that's why it's very important to come up and to produce with spotlights reports by the civil society organization. And this is a unique opportunity to critically produce a contrast with the reports presented by governments on the state of the achievement of the SDGs. So these reports, I mean the spotlight reports, can play a very important role during the forum, but they can also be relevant inputs to be used in many other advocacy processes. So for this reason, we want to encourage the GCE members to produce spotlight report in those countries reporting this year. So we would like to express our gratitude with our dear Aspire colleagues, Renee and Lei, who kindly agreed to lead us on a learning process that might be very useful for all on the preparatory process. So thank you very much, Renee and Lei, and welcome everyone to this workshop. Thank you, Luis.
Thank you, Bernard. Thank you very much. So I will briefly now share an overview of the program. Then during the session, we will explain in more detail what is expected for each part of the session. So this is a 2.5 hour workshop. The first activity is the welcome and introduction. So it's expected to me to explain the agenda. You will see already in the screen. This is a summary of the agenda. So we are now going to start explaining what is in the agenda. Sharing session 2, sharing on the civil society spotlight reports experience. That is 2 hours. And it has 3 main parts. First of all, we are going to set the contents and aims. That will be around 40 minutes. After that, we are going to have a session explaining the key issues and recommendations to highlight key messages for the spotlight reports. And it will include a 10 minutes break, in particular to give the space to the interpreters to have a rest, and of course for all of us to do the same experience. And the third part of this session is experience sharing and methodologies that will last 45 minutes. Finally, we will have 15 minutes to discuss a little bit what could be the next steps after this workshop and closing remarks. Well, when you register for the session, you share with us some ideas about if you have already experienced drafting spotlight reports. You see here the responses. So most of the people who are joining today don't have experience drafting reports. So 62%. 22% have previously done some reports, and 13% of the people didn't answer the question. And in preparation, there are one coalition who stresses that they are in the process of learning of that. So it will be wonderful to have participation from all of you, but in particular, happy to hear the experience of those 22% who have already this experience and who will be able perhaps to share what you have learned, what could be the challenge and the critical issues you address in their reports. We have also the question about what do you expect to learn from this activity. So I have summarized some of the, at the moment I did this exercise, we have 47 people registered. Today we have 63. So I am going to share the ideas in which at least 2 people have similar messages. So what are the expectations of the people who are joining today? So one critical expectation is to learn about the possible structure of a report. There are many kind of responses similar, saying I am not familiar with what could be a suitable structure for a report. So we are considering this within the framework of this workshop. Second, people want to learn to draft a spotlight report. What is really the process of drafting a report? What it needs to be in terms of considerations, in terms of contents, and all these particular issues. And then identify key areas to give focus to a spotlight report. So some of the comments in the registration saying the issues around education are different in different parts of the world, how to get focus, what could be the main messages or the main messages for our own report. Standards to draft a good quality report, what is expected, and what are really a good structure, and in terms of putting what is considered to be good quality in terms of methods, data analysis, data collection on all these important issues. And also some people mentioned the idea of having no previous experience drafting any report, so they expect to learn some tips to develop the writing skills for doing this particular report to the high-level political forum. And 4 more expectations that were kind of common. One, identifying possible methodologies to conduct a spotlight report. So the question of how to collect data, gather data, analyzing data, and identifying key patterns or different rare issues when analyzing the data. Of course, the data available in each country is different, and the possibility to analyze qualitative or quantitative data or mixed methods is also different depending on the skills available in each coalition. More how to use spotlight reports for advocacy. That is a really one that emerges strongly. So people want to know, okay, beyond presenting the spotlight report to the high-level political forum, how we can use the report for our everyday life advocacy process at the local level or at the regional level. How to present the report to different audiences. That is also an important question or comment that emerged in the registration box. So we do need to use the same language to approach different audience, members of the government, policymakers, different ground-based organizations, grassroots organizations. So how to really develop our skills to present the reports in a way that is comprehensible for everyone. And finally, gain more knowledge and networking. So this is basically the key trends we identified in the answers. And now to start our section today, in terms of a new question, we want to ask you who will be your target audience for a spotlight report. So maybe we can spend a couple of minutes and you can use the chat box saying, okay, I am doing the spotlight report, not only because I just want to reach the high level political forum and make the world aware of what is happening in my particular context, but who else? Yes, what is the main target? So please feel free to put information in the chat box, and later on in the section, we will just try to summarize what we learned from your responses. So that is all from the first part of the introduction of the session. And now I am going to introduce section 2, sharing on the civil society spotlight report, experience 40 minutes. So we will have, as I mentioned earlier, 3 main parts. And the first one is setting the contents and aims. So we are expecting Bernard here to give us a kind of general overview. What are the issues that matter more for us at the global level in terms of education policy? So Bernard, over to you, and it's just 10 minutes for this part.
Muchas gracias, Luis Eduardo. Voy a hablar ahora en español para diversificar.
Muy bien.
Bueno, el contexto, como ustedes saben, es complejísimo. Hay barreras y retos en prácticamente todos los sectores involucrados en las obligaciones y responsabilidades en torno a la educación y a todos los niveles. Evidentemente, en el ámbito financiero es donde con mayor, digamos, evidencia y evidencia científica, la educación enfrenta estos retos. Evidentemente, el mundo está todavía muy lejos de alcanzar ese 4 a 6% del Producto Interno Bruto para la educación. Y en contextos de emergencia, esto significa una barrera importantísima para asegurar el derecho a la educación de poblaciones migrantes, de poblaciones refugiadas y de personas y de familias que viven en contextos de emergencia bélica, pero también en contextos de emergencia sanitaria. El COVID-19 ha puesto en evidencia qué lejos estamos los estados y las sociedades para producir una respuesta solidaria a la emergencia sanitaria. Y hemos visto cómo las poblaciones que ya estaban siendo históricamente discriminadas han llevado la peor parte. Entonces, como bien dice Boaventura de Sousa Santos, la pandemia no ha sido exactamente democrática. Es decir, no todas las personas han experimentado la misma situación de vulnerabilidad, sino más bien que aquellas personas que históricamente habían sido marginadas en los procesos de desarrollo y en la realización de sus derechos, han visto durante la pandemia recrudecer esa marginación y esa exclusión. El financiamiento educativo sigue siendo deficitario entonces en la inmensa mayoría de países. Y esta debilidad financiera además se ha complementado con el embate de la privatización y la comercialización de la educación. La privatización y la comercialización no son fenómenos exclusivos del sur global. Algunos datos del mismo Banco Mundial indican que los procesos de comercialización y privatización son mayores en el norte que en el sur, pero en todo caso es un proceso que globalmente se ha recrudecido y ha tenido básicamente dos focos de agravamiento, diría yo. Uno es el de la educación y aprendizaje y cuidado en la primera infancia y el otro es en la educación superior. Dicho sea de paso, en la conferencia sobre educación superior que está organizando UNESCO, esto podría ser un tema de enorme relevancia para discutir. Y estos procesos de privatización evidentemente se han alimentado también del debilitamiento del financiamiento de la educación pública. Así es que son, digamos, dos caras de la misma moneda. Los procesos de comercialización y privatización además han tenido como correlato que los grandes sectores corporativos hayan paulatinamente, de manera progresiva, cooptado los espacios de gobernanza mundial de la educación. Vemos entonces como representantes de las grandes corporaciones, de las grandes empresas, en muchos casos alimentados por estructuras propias de Naciones Unidas, han venido ocupando espacios que tradicionalmente pertenecían a las organizaciones de la sociedad civil, espacios en la toma de decisiones globales en materia de gobernanza educativa. Pensamos que esto ha sido un gran error. Pensamos que esto ha tenido como consecuencia el debilitamiento del rol de los estados en la decisión de políticas públicas. Y finalmente pensamos que esta cooptación de los espacios de gobernanza mundial han además marcado un viraje de las políticas públicas en educación, desarrollando un sentido utilitarista, un sentido mercantilista de la educación, debilitando así el desarrollo de un currículum holístico que permita el desarrollo de conocimientos en diversas áreas del conocimiento y reduciendo el currículum entonces a aquellos aspectos que más interesan a los empleadores, a las grandes corporaciones y a las fuerzas utilitarias, digamos, de nuestras sociedades. Evidentemente, el debilitamiento del financiamiento de la educación ha determinado en muchos casos las dificultades de acceso a las oportunidades educativas y vemos, bueno, ya citamos el caso de los grupos migrantes y de personas refugiadas, pero también esta visión reduccionista de la educación ha limitado las oportunidades de acceso a las personas con discapacidad, ha limitado las oportunidades de acceso a las grandes poblaciones indígenas, que no solamente en América Latina, sino también en África y en algunos países europeos siguen estando, digamos, sufriendo las consecuencias de la exclusión y de la discriminación. Y es el mismo caso de muchas otras minorías étnicas. El debilitamiento del financiamiento educativo además ha tenido como consecuencia la limitación de otros productos y servicios asociados con la educación que resultan fundamentales sobre todo para estudiantes de escasos recursos. Estamos hablando del financiamiento para la alimentación escolar, y estamos hablando del financiamiento para el transporte escolar. Pero evidentemente el acceso por sí mismo no significa nada si los estudiantes siguen contando con enormes dificultades para disfrutar de una educación culturalmente situada. Y bueno, nuevamente el caso de las poblaciones indígenas, las minorías étnicas es un buen ejemplo, pero también podemos citar la situación de poblaciones migrantes que son obligadas a moverse hacia otras fronteras y que reciben una educación sin ningún significado, sin ninguna respuesta a sus características socioculturales. Y a esto hay que además agregar diría yo, retroceso global en materia de una educación género sensitiva. Hemos notado cómo en muchísimos países el interés por ofrecer una educación sexual integral se ha reducido. Hay grandes sectores conservadores de nuestras sociedades que se han opuesto a esta posibilidad, y esto es un asunto muy grave, no solamente porque priva del conocimiento a muchos y muchas estudiantes en materia de educación sexual, sino porque además alienta prácticas violentas y alienta prácticas supremacistas desde el punto de vista del ejercicio de una masculinidad tóxica. Y esto ha agravado las condiciones de desigualdad, no solamente dentro de las escuelas, sino también en el conjunto de la sociedad. Bueno, es un panorama, como ven ustedes, muy complejo. Por supuesto, no puedo en estos pocos minutos hacer un resumen de cada uno de los aspectos que agravan las oportunidades educativas. He mencionado algunos que me parece que son importantes. Y sobre estos temas, nosotros esperaríamos que los estados pudieran informar, pudieran ofrecer algunas pistas sobre las maneras que pueden utilizar para traspasar estas barreras, para superar estas barreras. Y sobre estos temas esperaríamos también que las coaliciones y los miembros de la campaña mundial por la educación pudieran ofrecer algunas recomendaciones que sean útiles para superar este tipo de problemas que enfrentamos globalmente. Bueno, espero que esta breve introducción sea útil y muchas gracias, Luis Eduardo, por la oportunidad.
Thank you, Bernard. Very useful indeed. And now, yes, it's really a challenge to identify in just 10 minutes all these critical challenges for the protection and fulfillment of the right to education. We have now about 3 minutes for people to say something. Oh, okay, I missed this particular challenge that we are facing in our country or our region. So you can just raise your hand or open your microphone and say, okay, I missed this aspect that maybe will be important to also include in the reflection we have in this workshop to be put in the list of key topics for developing ideas in our spotlight report. So please don't be shy, just please feel free to open the microphone and show your face if you want and say something like, oh, I missed this important topic. So anybody wants to say something? You can also put your ideas in the chat box. That is also absolutely fine. So going now to the second bit of this session, Aspen is going to share the aims, scope, and outline of the Spotlight report. We have 10 minutes for that, and then 5 minutes for comments and suggestions. So over to you, Rene and Lai.
Thank you, Luis, and thank you, Bernard, for walking us through the many challenges that we all face regarding education. So if we can share our screen, our slide, Lay, please. Okay, yeah, this is our session on capacity building workshop for developing the civil society spotlight reports, as already mentioned to you by Bernard and Luis. Yes, and yeah, next slide. Okay, so briefly, we will be walking you through the aims, the scope, and the outline of the Spotlight report. That is articulating your aims as a coalition, as education advocates, no? But of course, we all have a lot of things to say about education, about our key advocacies, and so we also need to narrow the scope of our spotlight report. We want to focus, that's why sometimes we call it spotlight, to really focus on the key issues and messages. And then we want to walk you through towards developing an outline by giving some examples. Okay, so yeah, so what is the spotlight report? I'm sure you are familiar about parallel reports. You may have submitted in the human rights committees, to the Human Rights Council, reports that are parallel, which means the government reported on something, on the human rights situation, and then other stakeholders, academia, civil society, communities may be writing their own parallel reports, no? Which means this is parallel to the government report. But at the same time, before we also call these types of report shadow report. So some of you may be familiar more with shadow and alternative reports responding to government. But we do not want to be in the shadows. We want to be, highlighting our issues and concerns. That's why instead of a shadow report, we said, oh, this is a spotlight report, no? And this is not only a parallel report, that means responding to government reports, but also going beyond. So the spotlight report is a really civil society analytical report on the SDG implementation status. As Bernard mentioned, we are concerned with reviewing regularly the implementation, the status. Are we moving forward? Are we going to achieve the targets by 2030? Okay, so that is the first aim of this spotlight report, to assess the status, progress, and implementation of SDG 4 in particular. And then to highlight the challenges in terms of equity, inclusion, access, quality, and financing in education, because these are some of the core targets embedded in goal number 4. But we also want to see the interlinkages of the education of SDG 4 with the other SDGs. We know that it contributes heavily to the attainment of the other SDGs. And so we are in solidarity. We're not existing in a silo, but we are actually all encompassing. And so we want to see the location, and the contribution of SDG 4 to the overall development and 2030 development agenda. And of course, we don't want just to analyze. We also need to put forward our policy asks, our recommendations. How do we move forward? Government, UN may have their own, articulation of how to move forward. We want to hear the voices of civil society. We want to hear the voices of the most marginalized, the excluded, because that's what we are. That's what we are representing. The other side of the equation, the people and those who are most excluded. Okay, so in the next slide, So this is just a reiteration of what I have discussed. We want a report on the SDG from the perspective of civil society, of coalitions, your coalitions, and also articulating the sentiments, aspirations, and recommendations of the most marginalized. We want to have, we want to highlight the role and the value additions of civil society in the SDG processes, because we are concerned and we want this to achieve the most important goals and targets of the SDG, especially for us in the education sector. It is also one way by which we are able to have, a more consolidated consensus building among different stakeholders in the education, so that we have a stronger voice. We have a unified voice on what should be done, on what do we see as important gaps in the education sector, and we want to put that in our spotlight report. And of course, we link with other movements, with other social movements, and so we link SDG 4 education with the other goals, and this is one way by which we are able to develop a bigger consensus around the SDG and for our specific contribution on education. Okay, so now, as I mentioned, yes, it's so broad. I know you have put up volumes upon volumes of, the report, your analysis, your recommendation related to education, because you have been working on this advocacy for a long time. So we want to narrow also the scope of the spotlight report so that it's more focused. You spotlight on specific issues, critical issues, or which you want to achieve urgently at this point in time in global platforms and especially in the national context. So we narrow the scope depending on the aims that you put into the spotlight report. What are the specific aims that you want to achieve in the spotlight report? And of course, there are also some limitations in terms of time frame. We want to be in time for the high-level political forum in July, so we have about 2.5 months to work on this. But of course, we know that the shelf life of our spotlight reports do not end with the HLPF, because this can be a continuing thing when we engage our respective governments. Then we're not simply tied, but it may be one of the high points in our advocacy, so that the global advocacy, when we work together, can amplify our respective positions. And then, of course, we can narrow depending on what key messages we want to articulate, we want to put up. And then, of course, realistically, we also look at our capacities, which areas of work are we really good at, or we want to push forward. And then, of course, resources and available data. Sometimes when we do the spotlight reports, we don't have data about equity, we don't have data on privatization or financing. And so we try our best, use alternative sources or use other ways by which we can get government data and other sources through our own advocacy. But of course, sometimes there are really concrete limitations on the availability of data. So these are the things that you should be considering when what will be the coverage of our spotlight report. Okay. So now they can go more, how the HLPF can define our scope and our objectives for the spotlight report. Yeah, Lei, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rene. So, bonjour, buenos dias, y salam. Greetings from Manila. I am Lei Santiago of Aspen, and we are very pleased to be sharing this space with you again So in addition to what Mr. Rene has shown, the HLPF theme can be, can inform the focus of your report. So if you were present in the March workshop that GCE organized, you might remember that we mentioned that the HLPF theme usually guides us in finding the focus. So this year, the theme is on building back better from COVID-19 while advancing the full implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. And we know that it'll take stock of the COVID-19 pandemic's impact on the implementation of the 2030 Agenda, on SDG 4, but also it will offer recommendations on how to ensure sustainable, inclusive, and resilient recovery. So then from this, the Spotlight report, as Mr. Rene mentioned, could then look at the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic on education from the civil society perspective, or it can highlight the interlinked and integrated nature of the SDGs and link goal 4 with the other goals that are up for review. So moving on to the outline. Once you identified your aims and your scope, it's much easier to develop the outline or set the structure of your report. So the process of developing a Spotlight report and this outline should take a participatory approach as much as we can. So this can be done in consultation with your members and your constituencies. And you may also check out the Spotlight reports of other organizations to get more ideas on how to develop your own outline. So here's an example of an outline that was used by Aspen in the 2021 Civil Society Spotlight reports. So first, is the country context. It just presents a brief overview of the country's economic and social context. And this will then provide the reader with the background information on what was going on at the time that the report was being written. And so the next section is on equity and financing concerns in SDG 4 amidst COVID-19. So this is a brief summary or discussion on the status of SDG 4 and moving on to the most significant equity and financing concerns. We also elaborated this to include, the government interventions or the government programs and policies in education. So it's no longer just, outlining the issues. It could also present the actions that were taken or what the lessons have been learned. And then the next section is on embedding SDG 4 in other SDGs. So again, the integrated and the interlinked nature of the SDGs. This can present how education is embedded in the implementation of the other SDGs that are up for review for the high-level political forum for that year. And then afterwards, you can discuss the role of education and sustainable and resilient recovery, because in 2021, the theme was on sustainable and resilient recovery. And so you want to discuss the concrete measures that were taken to link COVID-19 recovery plans and stimulus packages with SDG 4 and the 2030 agenda. And we want to put a spotlight on the importance of education and recovery. And then the final section will be a concluding note that outlines your specific and your actionable recommendations that propose ways for governments, civil society, and other stakeholders to address new and existing issues in education and ensure learning continuity, access, quality, inclusion, and equity. So from what we've discussed so far, I'm sure you're already forming initial ideas about your own Spotlight report's objectives and focus. And so now we would like to invite you to identify the objectives of your Spotlight report, given your country context and the HLPF theme for this year. I've put in the link to the Jamboard, and I hope you can see that. And if you can click on that, you can type away any ideas that you might already have on the objectives of your report. So if you click on this link, hold on, I can minimize my screen so you can see this. Okay, so given your country context and the HLPF theme, identify the main objectives of your Spotlight report. So you can see here some colorful post-its, and you can click this sticky note icon underneath the pointer, and that will give you the option to choose the color corresponding to the region that you're based in, and just typing your objectives, any initial objectives that you're thinking of, and then save that, and we'll be able to see your responses on this Jamboard. If you're having trouble with Jamboard, you can of course use the chat. No problem with that, and we can help you put in the sticky notes. So it'll be easier for GCE colleagues to consolidate later on. So we'll give you 5 minutes, I think. Is that okay? 5 minutes for that, or even less, 3 minutes. And then we'll give the floor to Luis or to Wolfgang for the synthesis. I hope that was clear, everyone. If you're having trouble, just feel free to raise the question in the chat box or even turn on your microphone, that's fine. So it's orange for Latin America and Caribbean. It's yellow for Middle East and North Africa, for green for the rest of Africa, so Saharan Africa, pink for Asia Pacific, and blue for Europe and North America. So again, underneath the pointer, you can see a sticky note. You can see underneath the pointer here on the left side, there's a panel, and this is the pointer, and this is the sticky note. And then you can just choose a color corresponding to your region and then start typing away. I hope that was clear.
Yeah, thank you, Leah. Thank you, Renee.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing all this very important stuff. And Wolfgang, so we expect you kind of summarize after people have the time now to express themselves about what could be the aims and scope of their spotlight report. So yeah, everyone, please feel free to put your notes. I particularly encourage those who are already engaged in the process of drafting and spotlight reports to share what you are doing, what is the focus of your research, the spotlight report, from my
You can see a chat in the chat box, Mwangi Waituru. She says, where they say that they like the objective of using the spotlight report for the purpose of sharing perspectives of the people. So if you could just let us know where you're from, and I can put that here. Okay, the responses are coming in.
That's for Africa.
Oh, yeah, okay. There you go.
I see one from Victor here, Guatemala.
In the chat box.
Yes.
The importance
It's something like
of investing into education to guarantee equity in education.
brilliant, Wolfgang. You are already now an interpreter. Good. So everyone, whatever you prefer, you can use the chat box or directly go into Jamboard and put your ideas. I know our colleagues from Brazil, for example, are not, Brazil is not in the 45 countries this year, but I understand you are already drafting a report. I was wondering, for example, what is the aim of this report, the general? Okay, I now see more people putting ideas here.
DHE in the Spanish note here. What is DHE? Dar visibilidad a la situación del DHE. What is DHE in English?
I suppose that is the human rights education.
Okay.
Yes, derecho humano a la educación.
Okay.
Okay, 1 minute left for this activity. Please put your ideas on the chat box or directly in the Jamboard. I see one here from Andres beyond that. That's not right education in Brazil.
Yeah, Lei, are you going to put that, Andresa?
Can you make that blue one from Europe a little bit bigger to be readable? Or push it up. No, it's fine. So,
I see one from Emmanuel. Thank you, Emmanuel. In the chat box. There is another one from Emmanuel. Thanks, Emmanuel. Enamul, sorry.
right.
Yeah, I do believe, Wolfgang, is now time for you to try to create a synthesis from that. Thank you.
All right, good. Thank you for the many votes that we have got here. Now we'll start possibly with the smallest section, the blue one, the European one. Europe and North America, we have a vote to say in our spotlight report, we would have to deal with linking global tax abuse enabled in Europe to finance the gap to meet SDG 4 in low and middle income countries. So that is relating to tax, how to better make use of tax collection. We have quite a number of things here from our Latin American friends. In Guatemala, it starts with the need to invest into more into education in order to guarantee the equity in education. The other point is on as the SDG 5 will be reviewed this year, it seems particularly important to give visibility and the connection between SDG 4 and SDG 5. The importance of investing in education to guarantee equity. That is the translation of what Guatemala colleagues have already said. To show the reality of in each country who are less advanced, how they, que se produce en el tema educacional poco interés, how little interest there exists on the side of our governments to consider education as an investment, and give visibility to the situation regarding the human rights approach, to sensitize authorities and citizenship in general about the challenges and recommendations necessary to guarantee the human rights to education and their realization. Step backs, and that is a particular vote that comes from Brazil, that there are step backs that need to be dealt with in their spotlight report regarding the rights to education in Brazil because of austerity and censorship, austerity programs and censorship measures under the present government, and the lack of action to face COVID-19 in all social areas. That is the Latin American contribution or interest to use the spotlight reports for those particular topics. Looking at Asia, there's a big, there's shorter versions of votes, if you want to call them. One is asking for greater accountability, inclusion and quality, and emphasis should be laid in lifelong learning focused on the rights-based approach and school to work transition. Then there is the quest for formula-based financing, particularly for girls and persons with disabilities. So looking at ways that people living with disabilities can be included better into the education system. Looking into the learning loss issues due to COVID-19 pandemic in different wealth cohorts. So it is possible that using distant methods, that poorer sections of countries have been spared that effort and have not been able to cover or bridge the necessities that were brought about by COVID-19. Inclusion and quality, financing for education should be a topic. Cross-issue and sector collaboration should be mentioned. Digital literacy, out-of-school children, girls' access to secondary education. These are all our Asian hand-ups. And now I'm going to MENA, asking for more transparency and participation. Accessibility and inclusion of education and emergency should be a topic. Education financing again. Impact of COVID-19 on education, how to connect SDG 4 and 5. Then last not least, our African votes. purpose of sharing perspectives of the people. Okay, I think that needs to be a bit more, might have to be explained exactly what is requested here. How could that be reflected in the spotlight reports? Discuss and analyze SDG 4 progress in the country in context of COVID-19 impact. We had that before in the one that our colleagues from MENA also mentioned. And then there's a typical sort of 4S sort of position here, increasing the share size, sensitivity, and scrutiny of the budget. That is born out of our financing matters and the other topics that we have in one of the OC3 programs. Come up with key messages and recommendations for country advocacy on SDG 4 and Education 2030. Okay, that's a general sort of recommendation. Key messages should be brought up. Then here is more a linking the revenue foregone in tax abuse to the financing gap. Sort of looking at how one could use tax abused or tax avoidance funds, if they could be recaptured, how could they be used to financing the gap in, possibly in education investment. Then there is inclusion and accessibility of people with disabilities, I would assume. And last not least, impact of COVID-19 on the retention of girls. So quite a number of different proposals made, from looking at the impact of COVID, but then also the general topics of the 4S and tax issues. There is the question of digital literacy. There is the question of how do we get people's voice heard in those spotlight reports. I think that's quite a broad variety of things that we see here. So that's interesting, and I think it will be up to every national coalition to really come to a conclusion as to what they want to put up, what is their most important one. You may have read those that we have shared with you before starting this meeting, that we had some from Philippines and Pakistan, and you can see that those the emphasis that you see in those spotlight reports do of course differ from place to place, from country to country. Our concerns and our importance that we want to shed on certain aspects that will differ from place to place, but I think that is something up for discussion at local level, at national level, where people have to come to conclusion, what do we want to put into our report. I think I'll stop there unless there is a way that people want to still tap into this debate and look at the Jamboard, what they take away from it.
Thank you, Wolfgang. Thank you for facilitating.
Okay.
Is there any way to save this information, Leah? Okay,
Yes,
but because,
possible.
lots of interesting stuff, very commonalities, but I at some point I was kind of, yes, we have at the global level launching a recent campaign on education in emergencies, and beyond COVID, I don't see really the issue of emergency very strong here. To me it was like, why this is the case? This is probably the main thing I missed from this reflection. I said again, beyond COVID-19. So what is expected now? We want to people allow a little bit more time to discuss this, or just keep that in our brains and minds and move to the next slide. And René, is that okay?
Yes, that's totally fine. We can just keep this open. The link is open, and anybody can continue typing in the
Okay.
Jamboard, but we'll continue on with this session if that's okay.
Okay, brilliant.
Great.
So now, sorry, you want to say something, Wolfgang?
No.
No, I'm fine. I mean, this is okay. It's the first snapshot of what colleagues want to bring up in their respective spotlight reports. So it's interesting to see the variety.
Yeah, this is great. Thank you, Wolfgang. So now I will just mention, because I suppose Leah and Rene, you also want to share your screen now, no? And we are moving into the next section, that is key issues and recommendations. So we are going to give the floor to Leah and Rene to share with us how to deal with the key issues and main messages for the Spotlight report. So they will have 10 minutes, and then after that, we will have 10 minutes for a break. Over to you, Rene and Leah.
Thank you so much. So that was a great session, everyone, and I hope colleagues already picked up, starting points from that. And it was also very good to see that you're able to formulate, these initial objectives. And I can also see that some of the sticky notes were already key issues and also focus areas of your Spotlight report. And I hope that these will be able to guide us as we go along the process. So now we're moving on to the key issues and the main messages. And here are some questions to guide you as you start thinking about what you want to highlight, what key issues you want to highlight in the Spotlight report. And I'm sure that there are plenty, but we do want to, spotlight, the most critical ones. And so the first question is, what are the priority areas of your organization? What are the priority areas of work? And these could be, the foundation of your work. And what is it that you are working towards? What is the agenda? And what do you want to achieve? And whose voices do you want to raise? So these are some questions to keep in mind. And then the next question is, what is the country's context? Again, we are emphasizing the context of the country because it bridges the gap. So when you include the country context in the Spotlight report, it bridges the gap between the reader and the writer, and it allows us to understand the current situation and why you highlighted that particular issue in your report. And in your context, which challenges then do you find the most pressing, and where are the gaps? Which ones are glaring? Which ones need to be highlighted, and who are in the margins? So you can start determining which issues are aligned with your areas of work, which issues are the most pressing in your country context, and which of these are related to education or affect education or pose barriers to access to education. And so these are some of the key issues that have been adopted by Aspen based on consultations with coalitions in 2019. And some of these issues are still relevant. Well, they're all very relevant even at the present. And so the first one is policy, institutional, and financing challenges. These could be the absence of policies or budget frameworks for SDGs and SDG 4, the poor coordination between the ministries and the SDG implementation, or the insufficient budget allocation for or the financing for education. Other critical issues in education could be, well, you've mentioned some in the Jamboard, and Werner has also mentioned many in his context setting. And other critical issues could be, the disparities and inequities in education due to multiple and intersecting factors, and the lack of education maybe due to, the transportation or the lack of infrastructure, and inclusion issues such as the lack of qualified teachers for persons or learners with disabilities, the gender issues such as the lack of comprehensive sexuality education as mentioned by Werner, or the multiple forms of violence that women, girls, and LGBTQI face. And then there's youth and skills. You can also mention how Youth have been particularly hard hit by the pandemic. They've lost jobs and they've been delayed entry into jobs, and they have worsening mental health, etc. And equality issues such as curriculum development, as well as neglected targets, neglected SDG 4 targets. And it could be, target 4.4 on youth and adults relevant skills. So these are only a few, and I'm sure this will be different in your respective contexts. But so then how do you decide which ones to prioritize? And you may have already done previous consultations, webinars, and meetings with your members and your constituencies, and you might have already picked up some of the recurring themes or the recurring points that your members have raised, and you could see the common threads and which issues they find the most pressing, and these could then be included in your report. And you can back them with recent data, with recent research, with reports, with relevant literature, and you can complement them with your own critical analysis of the situation as an organization and in the work that you do on the ground, and develop your own key issues. So I hope that was helpful, and I'll give the floor now to Mr. Rene for the discussion on how to develop your own main messages.
Okay, thank you, Lei. And as I mentioned, it's not enough to analyze the situation, identify the gaps in education, but more importantly, what would you do to address these problems, these gaps, these issues? And so we have to come up with the main message of our Spotlight report. Sometimes it can be comprehensive or a motherhood statement about the message. And I think you have to unpack so that you are able to come up with really concrete, very specific and actionable points. No? So they mentioned about the importance of going through whatever materials you have already on hand, including, data, reports that you have put up together, and also looking at the BNR of governments, current and also the previous ones, because current BNR are still in the process of being put together by the respective governments. But as soon as they are up, probably this is also one way to review what should be the content and the message that you put on your Spotlight report. But you can go, of course, beyond what government is saying. Okay, so it is also important to consult members, other stakeholders to discuss what needs to be done to address these key issues, what that you have already identified, no? And then look into the main messages also of the government in your country, and also the UNHLPF website to identify, whatever gaps or missing points or important points that needs to be highlighted and articulated so that we are able to move forward, we are able to accelerate progress in meeting all SDG 4 targets in a way that is sustainable. And then, as I mentioned, you have to drop and put forward concrete, specific, and action-oriented messages. So here are some of the examples coming from coalitions on the messages that they put across in 2021, last year. Okay, so from Japan, they said align inclusive education system as defined by the Ministry of Education should be within the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability. And so that's more or less a very broad statement, but they move on. We have to improve laws and policies in the country so that there is genuine inclusion for all learners with disability. So another point that they raise is institutionalize students' participation in school governance. And yes, but how do you do that? By involving them in decision-making processes in governing bodies in school and even in, within the ministry. Okay, Another example coming from Pakistan, the PCE, our coalition in Pakistan, to improve remote learning and access to quality education in Pakistan. This is within the context of COVID-19 and other emergencies. No? So one way to go about that is expand connectivity and device ownership, improve quality by further developing the content and making it more interactive, not only one way of engagement, but more interactive, and then strengthening curricula and by way of upgrading teachers' capacity, especially with respect to digital teaching pedagogies. And there are several more to unpack. What do you mean by improving remote learning? Okay, so another example coming from India is to increase budgetary allocation for education to at least 6% of GDP. And this has been time and again one of our core advocacy. But what does that mean for specifically in the context of India and for this period? You know, they go for specific allocation to identify, to be made to identify the out-of-school learners and to deliver education based on their context and needs, and also ensure gender-responsive budgeting to reduce girls' absenteeism and school dropout. So these are, you know, unpacking the main message with concrete, actionable, doable recommendations. Okay. So, Lay, what do we do now? Another Jamboard exercise?
Yes, I hope it's okay with everybody to continue participating in these Jamboards. But we can give you another link. And this time we would like you to reflect on the most pressing issues in education in your country and what could be done to address these. So given the aims, context, 2022 HLPF theme, and the organization's priority advocacies, identify the key issues that you will highlight in the report and then identify the main messages. I will be putting the link to the chat, and Luis and Wolfgang can facilitate this session once again.
Thank you, Rene and Leah.
There you go. I hope everybody can see that.
Yeah, unless there are very specific questions you want to raise or articulate from our participants, Luis?
Luis, just to say that there are 3 pages for this Jamboard. So the first one is asking you to identify key issues that you will highlight in the report. And then the next page will be on the main messages for these key issues. And then the third is what are the major data sources? I hope that's clear. And I hope everybody can start working on that. And if you have any questions, just please feel free to ask us.
Should we have a break?
Yeah.
Is this the break time?
Yeah. Luis, is this break time?
Luis? Luis, you're on mute. You're on mute.
Sorry, I was thinking that maybe it's better to do the exercise now because you already changed the ideas and then put all the information for 10 minutes, and after I will have these 10 minutes to organize the 3 pages. So it's better to do the exercise now and then the break, if everyone is okay with that. So my question, Leah and Rene, people can just navigate between the now 4 pages at the same time, yes? So
yes,
maybe,
yes.
Of course, as in the previous exercise, if you do prefer to use the chat box, please put your ideas in the chat box. And Leah, who is just brilliant in managing this Jamboard, can help us to put all the information in the right place. So maybe we should start identifying could be the key issues and main messages that you are going to put in your spotlight report. Please, those who are already drafting a report, share with us what are you doing at this stage? What are those key elements, key messages you are putting in the paper? That is the previous one.
Please, hi, we've got a few entries in, so we're making sure that the post-it notes are where they should be. And colleagues are welcome to just flip the pages, and if you have any ideas as to what main messages you want to prioritize in your report, you can just go to page 2, and on page 3 you'll find the Jamboard for the major data sources. Maybe we can call a few people, Luis, what do you think? Just to, you know,
Yeah,
yeah.
that is a good idea. Thank you, Leah. So I see a common trend is putting more attention on finance in education. But I was wondering, for example, who put finance in education? Maybe we can unpack this idea because we have been talking about finance in education for years. But what in particular we want to put into highlight reports? To invest more from the government? What are the sources in general in education, early childhood education, more investment in higher education? So I really want to invite the person who put finance in education to help us a little bit to elaborate the idea in the context of Africa, for example. So who was the person? Of course, I don't want just to ask you to speak if you don't, but it would be great just beyond saying finance in education, what we need to think about, what we need to highlight in the report. So I see it's Maria Rombarcera here. Welcome, Maria. Happy to hear you. Please go ahead.
I have included some of these that are related to financing and education. And you are right, we have been talking about financing, particularly looking at the share of education all the time in comparison to other countries, also in terms of the share allocated to primary versus secondary or versus higher education or early childhood and care. And we keep thinking all the time inside this box of this is the budget and this is it. So we just need, it's a very meager budget. We don't have enough and we just have to split it somehow, and it's never enough. You are absolutely right. So this is time now to think outside the share of the budget and to be thinking of how we can increase the size of the budget in a progressive form. How can we increase it in a sustainable form that it is not from ODA that doesn't allow to employ teachers because it's not sustainable, for instance, right? So this is very important to be thinking, to be making that link to tax justice, for instance, and this is where I would like to go. And that's why I have included some of these issues as well in Europe and also in North America, because they are enablers of tax abuse. So I think that we should be making that comparison, because tax abuse is depleting the government budget, and this is resulting in a very low amount in terms of size for the education budget. So we really need to take this into consideration.
Thank you, Maria. That is really helpful. And this is a good reminder, the reason why we need just not to talk about the size, but also about the share, the sensitivity of the budget, and all this stuff. Thank you. And I do believe these are really useful for our members to really engage with different companies rather than just talking about financing, elaborating a little bit more. And I also want to invite people in the call to really highlight, to one extent, we need to put more financings in early childhood education, for example, in some contexts, or in higher education. So what are really the tensions at the local level? Because often we think about boys and girls is primary and secondary education, and in our own messages, we are leaving people behind, and we sometimes forgot the very idea of lifelong learning education. So any volunteer to elaborate a little bit more about if you are trying to put together a clear messages for investing more in early childhood education or higher education? Maybe not at this stage, that is absolutely fine. And I also see in the key message, Leah, can you help me go back? So we see here in yellow in the MENA region an interest in digital education. I would like to invite the person who put that message of digital education. What do you have in mind? We have learned a lot about the challenges of using digital education, really leaving people behind because they don't have the technological device to access to education, or maybe they don't have the skills. And I am not talking about the students, also talking about their parents, who often have become the teachers. And also in many countries, teachers don't have the skills to use technological devices. So hopefully we can hear a little bit about your idea. What are you specifically are putting on the paper? What are the ambition with talking about digital education in this particular context?
Hi, my name is Futuh. I'm relating this main messages to the inclusion of education, and maybe it can also education, but the main message is that inclusion is not doesn't mean only the people with disability, but also how we can include the most marginalized, poor, excluded people in education, especially in emergency where they don't have infrastructure, resources, or tools. So inclusion in a wide spectrum.
Thank you, Fatou. Thank you very much. I see also some messages around this issue about people with disabilities, and that is, yes, such an important point. And I also really want to challenge those who are working on this. What specifically would want to put on the spotlight report to give more financing education, more finance resources for people with disability, but we rarely really go into the details of what is the meaning of reasonable adjustment for education for people with disabilities. So I would like to hear the voices of those who are very concerned about this issue in your countries. What are you going to put in the report? Exactly what? How you are framing these ideas? And to what extent do you think that will be made the difference between what we always hear about investing more in the education of people with disabilities? How your report will really contribute into this discussion? So anyone who wants to share maybe the research you are doing now to put in the highlight spotlight report, or yes, indeed, you can share your concerns, how to deal with this issue, and perhaps we have colleagues from Aspen who have done this before. Maybe we can share experiences.
Yeah.
Volunteer?
Can I speak?
Go ahead, Fatou. Thank you very much.
Actually, the issue of the people with disability is, especially with our governments, they said that schools are open for everyone, and we are receiving all people with disability if they want. But the issue is, as we put here, the infrastructure is not ready, the resources are not adaptable and accommodated to the needs and diversity of people with disability, and the tools. And maybe we can put the environment, the training of the teachers. So it's not about accessibility here, but rather than to accommodate everything to include them.
Thank you, Fatou. Thank you very much. I see also a strong messenger also related to financing education from Latinoamérica. La gratuidad de la educación pública sigue como un mensaje fundamental. So really the issue of free education, compulsory education could be a challenge. So I want to invite the person who made this comment to elaborate a little bit more. How are you planning to put this into the paper? And after that, I will give the floor to Alde and Enamul, who raised their hand. So who is my colleague from Latin America who wants to elaborate a little bit more about la gratuidad de la educación?
Sí, Laura, por aquí. No, la idea era un poco pensar en profundizar un poquito más el tema del financiamiento, como había mencionado María. Entonces, el tema de cómo se relaciona la gratuidad con el financiamiento adecuado, mecanismos de justicia fiscal, el no endeudamiento de los países, porque lo que venimos observando en nuestra región es un mayor endeudamiento y de hecho ya observamos que el endeudamiento de los últimos 5 años generó una caída en los fondos disponibles para la educación, entonces el financiamiento bajó 2% en nuestra región. Entonces, si los préstamos en un primer momento parecieran que son recursos adicionales para una crisis que tenemos en este momento, en el largo plazo el endeudamiento es un problema para los países y para las familias, ¿no? La gratuidad es fundamental, pensando también en estas escuelas de bajo costo, privadas de bajo costo, ¿no? Entonces, cómo el crecimiento de las tendencias privatizadoras nos viene llevando a escuelas de baja calidad y eso por un lado, y por otro lado, escuelas muy caras, solo para élites, generando más segregación, más asimetrías de poder, que van a significar problemas en futuro. Entonces, articular también el tema de la inclusión, o sea, la democratización de la escuela, no significa solamente poner personas en escuelas, sean públicas o privadas, y privadas pagadas con vouchers del gobierno. Eso significa pensar efectivamente la realización del derecho en sus múltiples dimensiones y el sentido de la educación que se está ofertando. Entonces, era un poco más complejo que solamente la gratuidad, pero espero haber sido clara.
Very clear
Gracias,
indeed.
Luis.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you very much. It's really putting together the issue of inclusion, no discrimination, segregation into the discussion about the gratuity of the education. Thanks, Laura. So I see some people joining now. I do believe that is now time for the 10 minutes break, in particular for our interpreters. Please keep your energy. And after the break, we are going to discuss a little bit about the major data sources, and we will share with you some ideas we have in terms of critical material that maybe you find useful to develop your ideas in the Spotlight report. So see you at 8, okay, my time. So in South Africa could be 3:45 in 10 minutes anyway. So see you soon. Okay, hello everyone. The break is over, so we are going to resume the activities. And my colleagues Ria, Lilia, and Rene have this brilliant idea to take a photo of all of us. So you are invited to show your face for the photo for our memories of this special event. Nice to see you, Fatou. And run, everyone. Please don't be shy. Hi, Julie. Great, more people joining the photo. Brilliant. Nice to see you, Albert. Okay, a few more, and then ready for the photo. Yeah. The interpreters are also welcome to show your face if you want. Hi, Punsa. Hi, Masuma.
Okay, everyone. On my count, right? 1,
Yeah.
2, 3. Lei, can you take also a photo?
Yes, of course. All good now. Thank you, everyone. Nice to see your
Okay,
faces.
thank you. Excellent. So before moving back to looking at our resources and our data possibilities and all this stuff, I remember we have Enamul who wanted to share something. Please, Enamul, go ahead. And there is also, I don't remember, sorry, the name of the other person who wanted to speak, but please feel free just to speak up. Enamul, over to you.
Well, good morning and good evening. I'm Namul from Campe, Bangladesh. The issue I wanted to highlight that in the Spotlight report, we need to cover whole range of SDG 4 targets, particularly target 1 to 7 and the means of implementation. So in the country context, that is one area I'd like to cover. And in terms of adversity, we need to highlight adversity by location, by sex, by ethnicity, and household income, and other country-specific exclusion issues. For example, in Bangladesh, we identified 12 different types of adversity. So how those are affecting the right to education situation in the country that has impact of policy decision and national budget. So this is one dimension. During the pandemic, learning loss was one of the biggest challenge. So how to recover that learning loss, particularly from the children from the most marginalized segment, that is one critical area. And although there are some distance learning modalities of education, but it was not at par for the persons with disabilities. So the situation for persons with disabilities is more severe than others. And there are, in some countries, it is not the mandate of Ministry of Education, it is Ministry of Social Welfare. So there are other issues as well. How to address those in the Spotlight report. These are some issues I wanted to flag up. And finally, the commercialization of education and ICT. When the issue of ICT comes, if the state-run education institution cannot catch up the innovative models of ICT-based teaching learning process and blended teaching learning process, ultimately there will be a big push for privatization, because parents get the benefit of using ICT. So rich people will be able to purchase the quality education by investing more money, and a poorer segment of the society will be excluded. So how to address those digital divide? We need to think about big push for state financing for ICT-based teaching learning process, and teachers are very vulnerable in the state-run education system. So huge investment will be required for the teachers' capacity development, and also looking into the curriculum reform, and looking into the teaching learning process and assessment. The assessment reform is also important in this case. So how those issues the government is thinking, what are the good practices in other countries, and what our country can catch up with in some of the innovations. So those are the issues I wanted to highlight. Thank you.
Thank you, Anamol. Thank you very much. I have just taken notes, and thank you indeed for raising the issue of teachers that maybe we just can't take for granted about their living conditions, their working conditions, and all this stuff that is so central to really ensure the right to education for everyone. And also raising and highlighting the issue of the digital divide that is so central, and maybe we'll have a particular space in the Spotlight reports we are all preparing for this year. So I saw...
Yeah, sorry. Can I take a 10-second more?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Many of the Asia Pacific country has carried out youth-led action research. So we had number of issues related to youth development, global citizenship education, human rights education, and education for sustainable development. So those would be one dimension. And recently we have also prepared some document for engagement into the Conventia 7. So now we have some ready reference on that. So how we can bring some of the highlights from there would be very useful. Thank you.
Thank you, Namul. And indeed, if the members of this call want to share something, maybe a preliminary report, a document that you feel could feed the other people's report or to elaborate the ideas, please feel free to use the chat box to share these documents. Before the break, I saw, but maybe I am wrong, Khalil, you wanted to say something? I mean, Khalil Radwan. If not, that is absolutely okay. And we just move to the options about data resources. So we can go back now to our Jamboard and put some ideas there, please. Yes, what are the major data sources that you are going to take into consideration for drafting, or maybe just to collect the data for the Spotlight reports? So I encourage you all to just share your views, your ideas, what sources you are now looking at to gather the information that you need to have in hand for addressing the research question of your Spotlight report. So I see here one in Spanish: Centros Nacionales de Producción de Datos Estadísticos, Instituto de Estadística de UNESCO, investigaciones académicas, investigaciones producidas por la sociedad civil. So a statistics report maybe by National Statistics Office, UNESCO database that is a huge source of information, academic research, and of course, research produced by civil society organizations. I see here Solange. Thank you, Solange, for your sharing your ideas, CSOs and NGO reports. So we can put that in the Jamboard. Thank you. This is just a reminder that you can use the chat box, and our colleagues Leah and Rene are very willing to support us putting the information in the Jamboard. Is any one of you planning, for example, to do interviews, I don't know, with teachers, parents, students, for example, or maybe with other stakeholders and other organizations working on specific areas?
May I speak? I'm Albe.
Albe, go ahead, please, and share your experience.
Hi. We actually recently did a focus group discussion of the persons with disabilities groups within our coalition, and those are already available. So we'd like to use that source of information to actually fill in the messages in our Spotlight report. Especially because I'd like to dwell also on the policy scan and analysis, because this is very important, especially now in the Philippines, that we have a newly signed law about for the learners with disabilities, and we connect that to the delayed implementation of the Alternative Learning Systems Act, which was passed 2 years ago but haven't been fully implemented, especially because it has a unique feature to address the issues or the needs of the persons with disability. So those are key sources we're looking at. We also would look into, as you mentioned earlier, on the PNR reports of our country, which we don't know yet of how the data is highlighted, or how the data, or if the data is actually available from our country itself, because there are points, or there are issues or samples from the SDG that aren't available. We also actually get involved in the right to education index reporting. So the index itself has we gathered data sources from there, and we see how available or not available the data for education is. So I think that's reliable enough to fill in the report itself of our spotlight report.
Thank you, Albi, for sharing this. And indeed, I have two questions for you. One is, okay, you are talking about people with disabilities, people who participated in the focus group, people with different types of disabilities. That is my main question. And the second one is related to ethics and personal consent. So who provide the personal consent to say, I want to be part of the focus group, and how you navigate those challenges in reality? I do believe that it could be useful for other members to know how to engage with people, because maybe we all are aware that we can go simply ask questions. You need to show and take consent and all this stuff. So please share your experience about the challenges of doing research, gathering data with people with disabilities.
Actually, the main advantage of our organization in the Philippines is that we have members from the Persons with Disabilities Organization. So it's actually one of the sector of INET Philippines is the Persons with Disabilities, alongside teachers, youth, very young children organization. So it becomes easier for us to actually gather them in the focus group discussions. But we actually divide these groups into according to their disabilities. For example, one group is for the visually impaired. The other group is depending on their needs. But we also partnered with key persons who can actually give us the proper way to actually divide these groups, or we actually also involve them on crafting the main questions or the guide questions for each of the groups. So that's just one of the advantage of INET Philippines, because even before the conduct of this focus group discussions, we have also partner with them in other projects. We also are talking with them with regards to the budget initiative in the Philippines with the national alternative budget. So it becomes easier to deal with or gather the information from them.
Okay, thank you all for sharing with us all these important details. And I have a question for all of you. Is anybody, for example, collecting data, maybe a couple of interviews or a focus group with people on the move? I mean, maybe asylum seekers, migrant refugees, or internally displaced people, either living in refugee camps or just moving across the region. I am thinking, for example, for our reports in Central America, many migrants and refugees moving from south to north, but also in the case of Africa, if you are willing, for example, to learn from the experience and the voices of people living in refugee camps in different parts of Africa. So if you are planning to do that, to really highlight the issue of education in emergency in the report, I invite someone maybe are taking this approach to share their ideas and the challenges of doing that. You know, we are talking about the emergencies in many different ways, but we rarely see the voices of asylum seeker, refugees, and internally displaced people in this kind of report. So my question is, to what extent we can, for example, do the effort to collect data, gather data from them. I see Brahan I don't see complete Momoni. Sorry for my pronunciation. Go ahead, Brahan. Maybe you want something to share in that direction or other direction anyway. And then Khalil Radwan. Go ahead, Brahan, please.
Bonjour. Bonjour en tout cas à tout le monde. Merci de la communication. Je pense que c'est très intéressant comme information. Et je voudrais justement un peu parler du Niger. Comme vous le savez, ces dernières années, nous faisons partie des pays au Sahel qui ont, en tout cas, qui font face à des difficultés de sécurité. Nous avons plusieurs groupes armés qui sont à nos frontières et qui vraiment créent beaucoup de difficultés de stabilisation des communautés qui font que beaucoup de populations se déplacent. Actuellement, nous avons une région, celle qui est plus touchée au Niger aujourd'hui, dont au moins 700, un peu plus de 700 écoles ont été fermées pour cause donc d'insécurité, rien que pour la seule région de Tillabéri. Et donc, si on fait le cumul avec les autres régions, nous avons environ 800 écoles qui sont fermées au Niger. Et ces 800 écoles donc, touchent environ plus de 62 000, plus de 62 000. La dernière information du 12 avril que nous avons à travers la rencontre donc, du cluster, c'était 662 500 environ enfants qui se retrouvent en tout cas dans la nature parce que effectivement les écoles sont fermées sous l'influence donc soit du déplacement des parents ou alors l'influence des groupes armés, certains qui disent de fermer carrément, qui s'attaquent directement donc aux écoles et ça fait que les écoles sont fermées dans cette zone. Et donc, dans ce contexte-là, en tout cas, les acteurs se mobilisent pour essayer de trouver des solutions alternatives donc, à ces enfants. Et nous, au niveau de notre coalition, nous sommes membres donc, du cluster éducation qui fait un travail, en tout cas, assez important de collecte d'informations sur le terrain. Il y a des organisations, surtout internationales, qui sont beaucoup plus, en tout cas, qui ont les moyens et font la collecte des données. Aussitôt qu'il y a un mouvement de communauté dans une zone, donc les informations sont collectées par rapport au nombre de familles déplacées, nombre de femmes, enfants, nombre d'enfants qui sont à l'école mais qui quittent avec leurs parents. Donc, une situation exhaustive pour mesurer quels sont les besoins justement urgents donc, de ces communautés-là. Et le cluster donc, reçoit ces informations et essaye de voir quels sont les partenaires qui essaient de se positionner pour essayer d'apporter en tout cas des solutions. Nous, ce qu'on a actuellement pu faire au niveau de la coalition par rapport justement à ces questions, on a, avec la collaboration de Save to Children, essayé de proposer des alternatives éducatives, notamment la création des classes passerelles. Donc, c'est-à-dire c'est des centres à passerelles qui vont être, qu'on a installé, on a installé actuellement 10 au niveau des zones les plus concernées par ces mouvements-là. Et ces centres-là reçoivent donc des enfants qui viennent des écoles fermées ou même des enfants qui sont à côté, qui n'ont pas été à l'école ou qui, en tout cas, ont précocement quitté les écoles. Au niveau de chaque centre, on a 300 enfants. nous avons recruté donc des moniteurs qui ont été formés et qui tiennent donc ces enfants-là avec une entrée avec la langue nationale évidemment des enfants pendant 3 mois. Donc, ils apprennent à déchiffrer l'alphabet, les chiffres à travers donc, les langues et ensuite donc, on introduit le français. Ça facilite la compréhension et la chose. Donc, ça, c'est ce qu'on est en train de faire actuellement. Et parallèlement, on travaille avec donc, les services de l'État pour qu'au bout d'une année, c'est-à-dire 9 mois, que les enfants puissent subir donc, une évaluation à la fin donc, de l'année et selon le niveau, ils soient réinsérés dans les écoles formelles partout cela existe. Donc, voilà un peu, on travaille également avec les communautés pour voir quelles sont les mesures alternatives de soutien de ces enfants-là en termes de qu'est-ce qu'il faut faire pour renforcer la protection de ces enfants, comment faire pour en tout cas aussi les accompagner du point de vue psychosocial parce que le
Thank you very
déplacement
much
des
for
enfants,
sharing
souvent,
this.
il y en a qui sont perturbés.
And now I want to give the floor to Khalil Rabwan, and then I will share some additional sources we had prepared for you that maybe you can find useful to draft your spotlight reports. Over to you, Khalil.
شكرا لك. أسعد الله أوقاتكم. أنا أريد أن أشارك خبرتنا في الائتلاف الأردني في هذه الأيام، ما فعلناه وما نحن مستمرون في فعله. مؤسسات العاملة، مؤسسات المجتمع المدني، أعضاء الائتلاف قامت من خلال مشروع كنا ننفذه بمراقبة تنفيذ الخطة الاستراتيجية لوزارة التربية والتعليم، فتعمدنا أن نختار المؤسسات العاملة في مناطق الأطراف، المناطق البعيدة، المناطق الأقل حظاً، المناطق الذين يتنقلون من مكان إلى الآخر كالبدو مثلاً، لنعرف كيف طبقت الخطة الاستراتيجية لوزارة التربية والتعليم في تلك المناطق. اخترنا معلمون، اخترنا مديرون، اخترنا طلاب، اخترنا أولياء أمور، ومن خلال المجموعات المركزة وجهنا لهم أسئلة تم إعدادها سلفاً وقمنا بتفريغ المعلومات، وتواصلنا أيضاً مع وزارة التربية والتعليم لنقل ما وجدناه في تلك المناطق. أنتم تعلمون أن التركيز عادة يكون في الغالب على المدن والأماكن التي تتوفر فيها البنية التحتية بشكل جيد، لكننا قصدنا أن نذهب إلى المناطق الأقل حظاً، فهم كاللاجئون وهم كالمشردين، فبالتالي كانت المعلومات جيدة جداً. ونحن الآن بصدد إعادة صياغتها وتسليمها لمكتب وزير التربية والتعليم. شكراً.
Thank you, Khalil. Thank you for sharing us all of this. I am going now to briefly share with you some resources we have that maybe you can find useful to feed your reports. And after that, we are going to the section of experience sharing and methodologies. So what are the sources we have? I will share my screen here. Maybe you feel that is better for all of us. So I do believe you already see my screen. Rene, do you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So I just put together some important stuff we had produced with our colleagues that I do believe is relevant for drafting the report. So action ID fact sheets, financing the future, delivering sustainable development goals. And these are available for Ghana, Kenya, Malawi, Mozambique, Nigeria, Tanzania, and Uganda. And my invitation is to go into the details provided there. There is very useful data about financing education, the challenges, the complexities. So I do believe this will be very, very relevant to get more insights and to put stronger messages into your reports. There is also a piece of research I want to suggest. NEFER, the National Foundation on Education Research, and the Global Campaign for Education conduct a piece of research on non-state actors in education, analysis of international civil society organizations' engagement around non-state actors in education. And the report is so rich and provides details for all these countries: Australia, Bangladesh, Pakistan, India, the Netherlands, Nigeria, Brazil, Chile, Cote d'Ivoire, and Tanzania. So the report is already available. So you can find this in our website, or I can share it with you. It will be really relevant to question the very idea of commodification, commercialization of education, and indeed all these issues about privatization and the role of the state actor, what we can expect. We are already in the process of preparing a report with the state education and academic stakeholder group that we will focus on quality education and lifelong learning for all, that we will be very pleased to share with you in the near future. And I do believe will provide also some ideas for you to take into consideration. And finally, the Global Campaign for Education is really willing to share with you our debt alleviation mechanism 7 case studies for Zambia, Gambia, Nepal, Mongolia, Lebanon, Georgia, and El Salvador, and a comparative case study looking at these different experiences. Two more: transformative education special issue collection that you can find in our online, in our website. And it provides rich examples about inclusion, discrimination, segregation, on all critical issues about problems are trying to really get in the right to education for people with disabilities or disadvantaged communities in the Netherlands, Brazil, Ecuador, Japan, and several African countries. And last but not least, a piece of research that is called Harnessing Education Technology as a Response to COVID-19 in 7 African countries: Burundi, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Madagascar, Malawi, Namibia, Rwanda, and Zambia. And this is a very stunning piece of research highlighting the critical challenges of using technological devices or technology in general to increase the access to education, and all the complexities for people in different areas in these countries to really access and make use of these technological devices, and also just questioning the beginning problems of that. I see most people joining here. I will allow all of them. So that is the start. Please feel free to send me an email if you can find any of these reports, and I will share all of them with you. So now time for the last part of this second section, experience sharing and methodologies. So I will give the floor to Ran Gale, our Aspen member, who will share their experience drafting the Spotlight report. And after that, Leah and Renee will share the methodologies they have been used for drafting the reports. Over to you, Ram. You have 10 minutes.
Thanks, Luis. Can you enable me to share this slide?
Yep. Now you can share your screen. Yeah, go ahead, Ram, please.
Okay, thanks. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Luis, Renee, Lei, for this opportunity to share the experience that NC Nepal on the Spotlight report on SDG 4, which we are doing since 2017 to continuously, even this year also. So today I'll briefly talk about, so I I'm quite conscious about the time, so I will try to be very brief. I may be fast, so sorry for this. So I will discuss the key areas that our report highlighted on the spotlight. It will be useful for other colleagues who are preparing this year's, and what the process we adopted, and the key messages or key issues, and what were the lessons that we can draw from our experience. Mainly, we discussed about the mostly the national education legislation policies and SDG 4 frameworks and plan policies and their implementations, especially, mostly focus on the SDG 4 financing strategies. And also, we discussed about the educational achievement. What are the major achievement of the SDG 4, and in terms of the performance, and also what are the gaps that there in the SDG 4, and what are the challenges in terms of SDG 4 implementation in the country level. Mostly, we look after the challenges in education financing, challenges in the governance, and challenges in other, ensuring the right to educations. So that were the areas that our reports covered. And also we come up with the key recommendations that were supportive to lead our campaign for further. In terms of process, so there was the discussion in the region level with ASBE. So ASBE's coalitions were together to discuss the plan, and we together a plan on the spotlight, and we prepared the outline at the country level. So this mainly, gave the ways how what are the issues that we want to cover, and what are the guidelines. Mainly this outline guided us to gather the informations, to gather the data. And also because our source of the informations was also the community people and community organizations, because we want to ensure the voice of the left out peoples. So we build the capacity of our members, especially in the SDG 4 mechanisms, like UNSCAP in the regional level, high-level political forum in the global level, and in the country level, there are the voluntary national review and voluntary local reviews also. So we let our members to know about this, so that they will be much better prepared on this process. And also, and then after we gathered the data from the and cases, and also the best practices on the SDG 4 implementations, SDG 4 financing strategies, and others, partnership collaborations also. There are some best cases also and best practices also. And also we adapted the interpretive and narrative analysis, and we come up with the data, draft report on the SDG 4. And this report was consulted with the members and even the government stakeholders and development partners, so as to validate the report and finalize it. And also, and there was the submission, this report to the national PNR agencies and Ministry of Education, National Planning Commission. And the good thing was civil society in NC's report were reflected in National voluntary review report of the government, and there was the referencing of civil society report. Mostly the key highlights, so I'll try to just be brief that the our latest report, which was in 2021, and even this year's also, so education is not free, so though it is supposed to be by the constitutions, and there is the paradox in policy and implementations, because some of the policy provisions are there, but if we see the level of the implementations, we cannot find this in a reality. So we found the paradox in policies and implementations. And also there is a wide gap in education financing, and if the issue of the efficiency and allocation in education. And so this is one of the challenges that our report also highlighted. And most importantly, we saw I mean, we try to see what is the level of the collaborations among different types of governments, local government, province government, and the federal government. So we found that there is the weak collaborations among them, and even intersectoral, like one ministry to the other, because SDG 4 is not only the responsibility of the Ministry of Education. This is also other agencies and other ministries also. They need to be involved, and I mean they need to be collaborated. But this is a kind of a weak. So we found, and lack of, I mean, SDG itself, it's need to be a kind of wider partnerships, and there should be a kind of different kind of partnership dynamic in the country level. But this also is quite a kind of weak. So need to have a kind of diversifying our partnership dynamics in the country level. So this kind of I mean key highlights that our report has so far find out. I will highlight some learnings that will be, I mean, be useful for us to I mean, take and carry on. So maybe I think we need to proactively plan on the SDG report. So if we plan well, so it is quite a good to come up with the good spotlight report, and we need to watch closely what is going on in the country level. So we prepare our spotlight from the civil society level. This is the one thing, and most importantly and equally, what is important is that the government also prepare the national voluntary review. So our, I mean, citizen voice and civil society voice also need to be reflected in the country report also. So we need to be conscious on this process. So together with this, we pressure the government or the lead agencies who is preparing, I mean, who is responsible for the country voluntary report. So we pressure them to make this process more inclusive and more participatory. And there is the, I mean, wider stakeholder participation in the process, and the voice of the, I mean, marginalized and left out peoples. It is included in the country BNR report also. So I think there should be kind of the, I mean, good watch from the civil society, and together with preparing the spotlight. The other thing is that we need to leverage the partnership among the civil society itself. So I think our experience is that we collaborated with the SDG forum in Nepal. This is the huge network. There is more than 5,000 civil society in these forums. So what is the good is that there is the, I mean, wider solidarity in the report, and also our message goes to the others agencies also who prepare, other civil society also who prepare the spotlight, who prepare the parallel report. They say, so if we leverage the partnership among the civil society itself, so it is good to have to bring other civil society in our agenda, in our position, and it is quite good to amplify our I mean the message. And also, it mentioned that equally we build out the I mean capacity of our members, network, and community people, because they are our partners for the data evidences from the community level. If we build their capacity, then we get the quality data, we get the quality informations. So it add the credibility and validity of our report also. So we need to much conscious about building the capacity of the civil society, our members, and sensitize the community people in this process, SDG for review mechanism process. This is the most important thing also. And lastly, what is a post work also, because once we have a report, we need to have a kind of good key advocacy acts or key messages, so that based on that we can follow up. It's not only the preparing the report and submitting, because mostly the follow-up is also the most important kind of post BNR, we can say post high-level political forum, we can say based on our message, based on our key advocacy agenda, we should have kind of a regular follow-up in advocacy work on this process, so that so we can prepare a kind of brief infographics, so that it will be easy to communicate, and it will be easy to convince the people also. So this is also the learning that based on our engagement since last 4 years, preparing the report, engaging with the governments, and submitting them in the different kind of regional, global, and country level platform also, and kind of regular advocacy and SDG form mechanism. So I think that much. Maybe I might be quite quick. Sorry. So I concluded here. So if other questions, so I am fine to participate in the discussion. Thanks, Luis. Thanks, Lee.
Thank you, Ram, for this detailed presentation in just 10 minutes. It's really appreciated and very useful for all of us to really take into consideration the process of drafting a spotlight report. So I will give now the floor to Rene and Leah to share issues around methodology, and then we will just wrap up and set the timeline.
Thank you, Luis. Yeah, and thank you, Ram, for sharing your experience. And I should say that Nepal, the coalition in Nepal, is one of the more active in terms of engaging in the HLPF through the Spotlight report. I will now go through methodologies in putting together the Spotlight report, but I guess many of you have already discussed and articulated methodologies for your research, for your data gathering. So I won't be going through them. I think I just emphasize, for example, this type of learning session is one of the way by which ASBE puts together its Spotlight report so that there is collective discussion and wisdom on how we are going to plan and undertake our work for coming up with the Spotlight report. You also mentioned FGDs. That's really also a powerful way by which we are able to get the sentiments and aspirations, the recommendations of our members, especially coming from marginalized sector. Now, I should also point out that one of the important features of our methodology is doing a peer review, a gender review. So once we have drafted the Spotlight report, we send them to gender analysts who volunteer to review and incorporate the gender perspective in the Spotlight reports. There is also a special section on the youth, and so consultations with the youth so that they can be given space in putting together the recommendations and analysis from the perspective of the youth. And in 2019, we take advantage of the survey that was conducted by GCE, and we also replicated that survey in Asia Pacific among our coalitions. And so we think that that is one way to go. If you have time, then that's really advisable. But for now, maybe a small survey or even focus group discussions might be sufficient for that purpose. Okay, so they will walk you through some of the concrete output of these methodologies. Over to you, Lei.
Thank you, Mr. Rene. And thank you, Ramji, for that excellent sharing on your Spotlight report experience. So finally, the ASBE report format. This is just a format that works for ASBE and its National Education Coalition members, but it can also give you an idea of what could be a suitable format for your Spotlight report. So while the report could be comprehensive with clear evidence, so this means data and research, it should be concise and not too long. It also suggested to have illustrations, tables, charts, and infographics for an easy read. So to make it more visually appealing, we often encourage members to include photos of, especially action photos, that they can include in the layout of the Spotlight report. We also often go for 4 pages, but if the timeline is tight, 2 pages is an option. So here in the first page, you can see Nepal's 2021 Spotlight report. And you can see here the country facts and figures. So there's a box here dedicated to different indicators for the country's facts and figures, such as the population and the 2021 Global Index score, which is the overall score or rank measuring the country's total progress towards achieving the SDGs. There's the SDG 4 dashboard, and the Human Development Index, and the GNI and income group, among others. You can also include tables and graphs, as I've mentioned earlier, just to visualize everything and to make it a much more easier read, and especially those who are more visual. It's nice to break up the space of the text. And as Ms. Alve from ENET Philippines mentioned, they have a youth constituency. So some of our National Education Coalition members, they were able to include a section for the youth. And youth were able to present their own recommendations and highlight the issues that they think are most pertinent. And these are done through the consultations of the members with their youth constituencies. And finally, this is an example of a front page and a back page of AFE Mongolia's 2021 Spotlight Report. So it's very nice to look at, especially when they're all together, the Spotlight reports, and the coalition details at the back of the page, where you can provide the contact details as well as a brief description of the coalition. So I think that is it from us. And we thank everyone, especially GCE and all the participants, for joining us today and for participating very actively. So over to Luis now. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Renee and Leah. This is wonderful and very useful. Thank you very much. We have only 10 minutes, maybe less than 10 minutes left. Sorry about the timing. And I want to share my screen just to show you this. Just 1 second, please. Share the screen. So I do believe that a very practical question now to follow up on this workshop is to really know who is currently drafting or planning to draft a spotlight report for the High Level Political Forum 2022. So please put in the chat box the name of the country you are preparing the report and the name of the coalition organization who is leading the process. This will allow us to really know what can we expect in terms of how to support you and to continue in this process. So, and in line with this, I want to share with you all, I am very aware, and we are all very aware, that people are working, drafting this report with 3 very different possibilities. I mean, resources, technical skills, time, and different constraints. But anyway, we want to take the chance to share with you what we do believe could be possible timeline. So you see there, our expectation could be for all of those who are already drafting the report or starting to draft the report to see the definition of the aims, questions, scope and structure of the spotlight report by May 20, 2022, very soon, in 10 days, less than 10 days. Then to have a clear indication about methods, the process of data collection and data analysis. We already heard from Rennie and Leah many possibilities, maybe some interviews, some focus groups, or looking at data already available, the fact sheets, or the different resources we shared today by June 15. And then really pushing the process of drafting the report by June 30. And we expect to do a global launch during the high-level political forum. So this is an invitation to encourage you all to share with all of us your spotlight reports, and Bernard will share with us some details about what we do expect in some of our events to share those spotlight reports and to really celebrate the information or the value of these reports. So this is now time for the last session of our workshop. So next steps and closing remarks. So we have you already the contact details. We are in the position to share the materials, the presentations, and all this stuff. And happy to hear about if you are willing to join the global launch of the Spotlight reports. And I will give now the floor to, I see Wolfgang, you want to share something. So Wolfgang, and then I will give the floor to either Bernard or Wolfgang if you want to close the session. But before that, I want to really thank you, the speakers, Rene, Lai, Bernard, and Ran, for your great support with this workshop. This is wonderful. Also, Wolfgang for helping us to facilitate the session. All of you for joining us at very difficult times, very early here in Latin America, very late in Asia. So this is really appreciated. And I really want to thank you, my colleagues Salma and Filani, for the great support with registration and all our interpreters. Thank you very much for your wonderful work. Over to you, Wolfgang, and then a couple of minutes for Bernard and Grant. Thanks.
Yeah, it's a bit of a concern that I have, that I realized that on this webinar we had possibly 2 or 3 African coalitions, whereas we are aware that there will be 16 coalitions from Africa that are supposed to present VNRs, and therefore to have them also engaging in Spotlight reports production would be appropriate. I don't know what the reason is for this, for the poor showing. So maybe that's something I can discuss with Solange, whether we can have a repeat of this exercise or talk to those countries that are supposed to present their VNRs, come forward with VNRs, that we are engaging with those coalitions bilaterally in order to sort of get them going.
Thank you, Wolfgang, for raising this. I just want to share with you how the process went. So Solange had been very keen to us to really disseminate this even among the ANSEFA members. So we were expecting to have, to get more involved. And I personally sent some emails, personal emails to those countries inviting them to join. So I don't know, maybe the timing, people are busy, really don't know, but happy to engage with those coalitions if needed. We did the same with all the regions. So I see Solange, please go ahead. And then Bernard and Grant. And sorry for, we are a little bit late closing the session. Solange, over to you.
Thank you, Luis, and thanks Wolfgang for raising that. Yeah, definitely, I think we need to have another session with the African Next and talk to them and use maybe also use the documents that have been shared by ASBE colleague and invite one of the ASBE colleague if they are available to share more on that. Yeah, we'll organize that. Thank you very much again for organizing the session.
Yeah, I see also here, thank you, Laura Gianginetti, for, we can share the recording and maybe people want to go to the recording and to find this useful for drafting the report. So this is another alternative that is a little bit more practical and we can do that straight away. So Bernard and Grant, over to you to just closing the session.
Thank you very much, Luis Eduardo. Well, I think that it's our responsibility to learn each other. I mean, and we have to rely on those who had a great experience. So thanks to ASBAE for leading us in this process. I think that the right to education is a shared responsibility, and we have this responsibility to report and to make the contrast against government's reports. So just let me tell you that the GCE Secretariat is organizing a specific side event in order to present the Spotlights report during the high-level political forum. And this might be a good opportunity for those who are preparing the reports to really show the outcomes and the conclusions and the recommendations. So we will keep you updated. We will be organizing another session, informative session around HLPF, and we'll be able to provide specific dates on where we are in terms of the overall organization of civil society participation in the high-level political forum. So thanks again to ASBAE colleagues, thanks to our Secretariat colleagues, and thanks to all of you for your great participation in this fantastic session. I think that we all have learned a lot, And now let's move ahead in practice. So thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you very much.
everyone. All the
Thank
best
you
and
all.
keep safe.
Good luck
so much.
granting your reports, and we are here to try to
Bye.
help. Bye-bye. Thank you, Renee and Leah, again. Wonderful work. Thank you.
Shared learning.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Gracias. Chao, chao.